So welcome back to this MSCA Doctoral Networks 23 call info event. I would like to shortly remind you, if you didn't take the poll yet, let's go and see who are participating today in this event. So who are you? And it seems that most of you, at least 50% of you, are potential applicants. We have also some project managers and some maybe IT and DN project coordinators as well. Let's go to the next question in Slido. You can still reply, of course, if you want. So what is your organization type? So it seems that we have many academic participants, so from higher or secondary education establishments, almost 60% of you, research organization, 25%, public bodies, maybe the non-academic sector did not reply yet to the poll, but you can also do it later on. Let's maybe check the last question. So it's also important for us to know if you have a previous experience with MSCA doctoral networks or innovative training program. And it seems that the majority of you, which is good, is already very experienced in the program. So it's very good. On the other hand, we have still 40% of you who may not be so experienced in the program. And this is the ideal session for newcomers to know more about the program and how to prepare a good application. But also for the other one with a lot of experience, it's also good that since we have quite important novelties for this 2023 call. And let me also introduce my colleagues who will give you more information about all these novelties. So I would like now to introduce Julien Jordani, who is the call coordinator for the MSCA Doctoral Networks in the MSCA Doctoral Networks unit in the European Research Executive Agency. We will also have Eleni Deligiani, and Eleni is a deputy call coordinator of the Doctoral Network in the same unit, MSCA Doctoral Network unit in the RIA. And finally, together with us, we have Michaela Bitsakis. And Michaela is head of sector in the MSCA Doctoral Networks unit in the RIA as well. So let me also remind you about the Slido. So please submit any questions you may have already through Slido. You have the QR code appearing on the screen. You can also use a reference code DN 2023. So we will have a dedicated session of question and answers after this full presentation. But now let's start with all the novelties and the presentation of the Doctoral Network call by Julien. Julien, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this information session. So I'm going to give you an overview of the Doctoral Networks call, and in particular, the 2023 features. But first off, I'm going to talk about the Marie-Skłodowska reactions in general. So Marie-Skłodowska reactions, a world reference for research and training. What you need to know is that at the core of the Marie-Skłodowska reactions is really the human capital development. So it's really the researchers' training, their skills and their career development. This is really at the core of MSCA. Now, MSCA is a bottom-up research program. So that means that in the previous slide, you can see that there is no prescribed topic for research. You can come up with any proposal in any field of research that you want. There's a strong element of mobility between countries, between disciplines, between sectors, with an idea of a strong collaboration with the industry and the SMEs. And we hope to have a structuring impact on the organizations that partake in these programs through the delivery of excellent programs. And one thing that's also important is that MSCA is providing attractive working and employment conditions for the fellows that are within the program, but we hope that it also gives an incentive to continue these attractive conditions later on. Now, MSCA, within the bigger picture of Horizon Europe, you see that we are under the Pillar 1, Excellent Science, together with the European Research Council and the research infrastructure. And MSCA, I'm going to tell you about doctoral networks, but it's not the only MSCA program that we have. Here you can see the other programs, and as an indication, you see that for the 2023 call, we have a budget of around 435 million euros, and the deadline to apply to the current call is the 28th of November this year. Now, I told you about the MSCA in general. Now, what about doctoral programs, doctoral networks? So, in a nutshell, what is a doctoral network? A doctoral network is a consortium of entities that is going to propose an overall coherent research project and a number of interlinked individual PhD research projects for doctoral candidates, so PhD fellows, that they will recruit in the future. So it's important to note that this is a program for institutions. It's not an individual fellowship for a PhD program. This is a network. Now, what's in it for the doctoral candidates or the PhD fellows? The idea is to train the doctoral candidates to increase their career opportunities and employability in the future. That's really the core part of the doctoral networks. So this is done through individual research projects, as I said before, and also with the provision of more formal sorts of training through research, and also other transferable skills training, all with the idea to improve their overall employability. So the idea also is that they will be exposed to different sectors and to different countries. They should be properly supervised, and the idea is also to draw a career development plan for them that will need to be revised on a regular basis. Now, what's in it for the institutions that are going to apply? Well, first off, it's attracting talent. So basically, you're going to recruit EU-funded excellent doctoral candidates. You're going to enhance your network as well with the idea of enhanced transfer of knowledge and cooperation between the different sectors and the disciplines. You will increase your research capacity as well through these programs, these additional programs. And the idea as well, in a kind of a structuring effect, is to enhance the training program for doctoral candidates, for doctoral studies in general. So that's what's in it for you. Now, what's in it for Europe? Why do we fund that? So basically, the main idea, as I said before, is to strengthen Europe's human capital. Enhance the talent and the circulation of knowledge between the different sectors, between the different disciplines, between the different countries, with a more attractive career for researchers and better employment conditions. All of that to increase Europe's attractiveness for research that can lead to its sustainable competitiveness. So again, the idea of collaboration between organizations and sector, but a sustainable collaboration between organizations and sectors, not only limited to the lifetime of the project, but further on. Last but not least, Doctoral Networks is fostering open science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I have to say that open science is just not only restricted to MSCA, but it's an overall feature of Horizon Europe. Now, I said that this was a bottom-up scheme. You can come up with a proposal in any field of science. You just have to choose one scientific panel. So the Doctoral Networks, MSCA in general, is divided in 8 scientific panels that you can see here on the slide. And basically, you have to choose one scientific panel in which to submit your proposal. Now, you will see when you try to submit a proposal that there is a number of descriptors, MSCA descriptors. So those are lists of keywords that belong to certain panels. So you can choose up to 5 descriptors when you submit your proposal, and the first descriptor has to be within the panel, the main panel in which you submit. But then you can choose up to 4 different other descriptors that can belong to different other panels. So there is a degree of interdisciplinarity within this program. Now, what you need to know is that there are three implementation modes, three flavors of doctoral networks. There is the doctoral networks period that we will call standard for the rest of the presentation. There is also the industrial doctorate, which has a strong focus on the industrial aspect of doctoral training. And there is also the joint doctorates. And the joint doctorates has a more structuring effect with the delivery of joint or multiple degrees. More on that later. But basically what you need to know is that all the three modes compete within the same scientific panel. So there is no budget that's earmarked for any of the modes. There are budget earmarked for the panel, for the scientific panel, and all these modes compete within the same panel. Now, I talked about joint double degree, non-academic sector, a few definitions maybe that would be important for you. What's the difference between a joint, double, or multiple degree? Well, this is quite straightforward. Basically, a joint degree is a single diploma issued by at least two different organizations located in two different countries and recognized officially, obviously. Now, a double or multiple degree is two or more separate degrees from two or more institutions in different countries and recognized officially. Now, this is for the joint doctorates, and you will see in the proposal that you need to submit a letter of pre-agreement to deliver these joint double doctoral degrees. And this is mandatory in the proposal. There is a template for that in the proposal template. Now, we've talked about academic and non-academic sector. So for us, the definition of academic sector is any public or private higher education establishment, public or private non-profit research organization, and international European research organization. Now, the non-academic sector definition is a definition by exclusion, if you will. Any entity that's not part of the academic sector is a non-academic sector entity. And I draw your attention to the fact that non-academic does not equal private, right? So you see that for us, a private non-profit research organization is an academic sector. So be aware of that when you submit an industrial doctorate, to not be confused between these two concepts. Last but not least, what about participants types? There are two ways to participate in a doctoral network, either as a beneficiary or as an associated partner. Now, a beneficiary, as the name would suggest, benefit directly from funds from the doctoral networks. So those could be academic or non-academic. They sign the grant agreement, they recruit the researchers, so the doctoral candidates, they train and host the researcher, they participate in the supervisory board, and they directly claim costs. Now, there is another category of entities that can participate in these networks as associated partners. And these associated partners, they do not sign the grant agreement, they do not recruit the fellows, they cannot recruit the fellows, and they don't claim costs directly. But it's still interesting for them to participate and for the network to have them inside, because even though they don't recruit researchers, they can host seconded researchers. They can provide training. They participate in the supervisory board. So it's kind of entities that participate on top of the consortium of beneficiaries and that provide an added value to the network. Now, this is the end of the first part of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and then I give back the floor to Audrey.
Thanks a lot, Julien, for this very nice introduction and key information about the doctoral networks and the important definition as well, in order to go through the proposal in more depth afterwards. So we would like now to give you a few frequently asked questions, also linked to the topic that was presented by Julien. And the first question that we usually also receive quite often is the following. So, is the non-academic sector participation essential in a doctoral network? And this one, I will give you the answer. So as you may have seen, the non-academic sector is crucial and is very important. It's one of the objectives also to foster collaboration between academic and non-academic sectors. So it's indeed essential to have them participating in your doctoral network proposals. However, we are quite flexible on the type of participation. So they can be beneficiary, but they can also be associated partner. And depending on the implementation modality, you will also see the slightly different objectives that they should fulfill. So as some of you are experienced maybe with previous innovative training networks under H2020, where sometimes we were requiring the participation of the non-academic sector as beneficiary, you will see that now under Horizon Europe, especially since the call 2022, the participation of the non-academic sector is more flexible and can be as beneficiary or associated partner. But it's still, they play an essential role in the proposal, and this will be assessed by our expert evaluators. So the second question is about the call budget and how it is distributed among the scientific panels. And for this one, Eleni will give you the answer.
Thank you, Audrey. So, how is the call budget distributed? For all doctoral networks, including the joint doctorates and the industrial doctorates, all proposals are ranked under 8 scientific panels, 8 major scientific panels, which correspond to 8 areas of research. We have, for example, the chemistry panel. We have the social sciences panel, the information science and engineering panel, the economic sciences panel, the life sciences, the mathematics, the physics, and so on, the environment and geosciences panel. So this is one fact. So we have the proposals ranked under 8 scientific panels. Then the doctoral networks, as you remember from the presentation of Julian before, they are a bottom-up scheme, which means that actually the doctoral networks address the needs of research and innovation as those are identified from the ground up, which means by you, by the applicants. Accordingly, also with the budget is allocated to each scientific panel in proportion to the number of eligible proposals that are submitted to that panel. So in the end, it is you, the applicants, that decide how the budget is allocated.
The budget is divided based on the number of eligible proposals submitted per scientific panel, indeed, yes. We have a third question, third frequently asked question, which is about if an organization can submit the same proposal in several scientific panels. So we had the case in the past, and maybe Michaela can give you more information about it.
Thank you, Audrey. So unfortunately, now it's not possible. So the answer is very simple. It is actually no. The proposal can only be submitted in one of the 8 main scientific panels. And this is also the case, and this is very important to bear in mind, also for industrial doctorates and for joint doctorates, which also need to be submitted in one of the main scientific panels. And at the end of the evaluation, what will happen is that we will establish a rank list for each of those scientific panels.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So let's now go back to the main presentation and to the second part of the presentation on the eligibility conditions of the doctoral networks. And this is a crucial part for you to be able to prepare a good and eligible proposal. And for this, Julien will tell you more about it.
Thank you, Audrey. So welcome back again. Now we're going to be a bit more technical with the eligibility part of the proposals. So what is an eligible proposal? So first off, eligible participants. So now we're talking about the institutions, of course. So who can apply? basically any legal entity worldwide, right? So be it a university, a research institution, an SME, a business, any other socioeconomic actor can participate. But not all the applicants are eligible for funding. A little bit more on that later. But in a nutshell, EU member states and associated countries to Horizon Europe are eligible to participate and get funding. Low to middle income countries are also eligible to participate and get funding, but high income countries are eligible to participate but not to get funding. But I will explain that in more details later. So you have to be a consortium to apply, and the basic rule is that you should be at least 3 different entities from 3 different member states or associated countries, and one of these 3 has to be from a member state. So this is the minimum eligible condition. Of course, from this, you can have many more beneficiaries, and as regards associated partners, there is no minimum or maximum number of associated partners. It really depends on your proposal and the need to have associated partners for the sake of the scope of your proposal. Now, how about the size and duration of your proposal? So basically, you can claim or request up to 540 person month for all types of action. And this is a novelty in 2023. You might remember that in 2022 and 2021, for doctoral networks, the standard ones, you were limited to 360. Now for 2023, this is 540 person month for all types of actions. Now, in terms of the duration of the network, this is maximum 48 months, so 4 years, for standard DNs and industrial doctorates. Now, for joint doctorates, you have an incentive this year, and this is new in 2023. You can have a maximum duration of 60 months, so 5 years. And the reason for that is below the duration of the fellowship. So I said before that you're going to recruit when your project is selected for funding and you start the project, you will have up to 1 year to recruit the doctoral candidates. And you're going to offer them an employment contract when you recruit them. And you can give them a contract from 3 to 36 months for standard DN and for industrial doctorates. But for joint doctorates, the incentive is that you can offer them a contract of up to 48 months, right? So basically, that leads to a network duration of up to 60 months. Now, this is a maximum, and it's perfectly fine to have a joint doctorate with a mix of fellows that have a 36 months contract and other fellows that have a 48 months contract. It doesn't, it's really up to you. Now, these fellows are recruited, but then they can be seconded to different, to other beneficiaries or to associated partners from the consortium. And you have a limit for that for standard doctoral networks. They cannot be seconded for more than 1/3 of their fellowship duration. So that means that if they have a 36 month contract, they can only go on secondment for up to 12 months. But for industrial doctorates and joint doctorates, as an incentive, there is a flexibility that there is no secondment limitation. So you could have a fellow recruited by a university in an industrial doctorate and being seconded to an associated partner from the non-academic sector for 60% of their time. Why not? That's possible. It's covered by the rules. Now, there are a few other eligibility conditions. And one very important one is that all beneficiaries must recruit at least one doctoral candidate. So it's not possible to have beneficiaries that does not recruit. They all have to recruit at least one. They also have to host and supervise them in their own premises or use associated partners linked to them to do so. In order to ensure some geographical diversity in the networks, no more than 40% of the budget should be allocated to the same country or to a single international organization. I will tell you a bit more on that later, but it's important to note that this is about the budget. It's not about the person months. You will see later that the salary of the fellow is also subject to a country correction coefficient because the cost of living in Sweden or in Portugal is not the same. So Just looking at the number of months of each fellow is not enough to figure out this 40%. You have to look at the budget. Last but not least, there are some resubmission restrictions. So if you submitted a proposal in 2022 and you had a score below 80%, you should not resubmit the same proposal for the 2023 call. You can resubmit it again in 2024, but not in 2023. So that's only for the previous year. There are also some specific eligibility conditions for industrial and joint doctorates that I will explain now. So for industrial doctorates, as the name suggests, a strong industrial component, and all the fellows in the industrial doctorate project have to spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. So it's really the time they spend there. It can be as a secondment, it could be because they're directly recruited in the non-academic sector, it could be because they have 2 consecutive recruitment. They have to spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. So the non-academic sector entity can be either a beneficiary or an associated partner. There's full flexibility on that because there is no secondment limitation. So you could have the 50% stay in the non-academic sector purely through secondments. One thing that's important, that's mandatory actually, is that the academic and non-academic institution jointly supervise each fellow. Now for the joint doctorates, there is an additional criterion for the consortium composition. So within the consortium, there should be at least 3 participants awarding a PhD, and 2 of those have to be from a member state or an associated country. Now, all the fellows have to be enrolled in a joint double or multiple PhD delivered by entity from at least 2 member states or associated countries, each and every fellow. There should be joint admission, selection, training, supervision, and governance of the network. There are letter of pre-agreements, as I told you before. That's in the proposal template. And as an incentive, the fellows can have a contract of up to 48 months, and the network can be up to 60 months. Now, to summarize, in terms of consortium, for all the modes, you should have at least 3 different entities from 3 different EU member states or countries associated to Horizon Europe, of which 1 from a member state. Each beneficiary must recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate. There should be no more than 40% of the budget for any given country or international organization. Associated partners, they cannot recruit, but they can have a very important role in this network because they can host secondments and they can provide training. In terms of project duration, 4 years for standard doctoral networks and industrial doctorates, 5 years for joint doctorates, and for the fellowship duration, 48 months for joint doctorates and 36 months for the other ones. In terms of secondments, you only have a ceiling for the standard doctoral networks, and that's 1/3 of the fellowship. There is no limitation on secondment duration for the 2 other modes. Now, this is for the eligibility of the consortium, and that's an important information for you. Now, what about the fellows that you're going to recruit later on? So there's a number of conditions for their eligibility. They have to be doctoral candidates, and that means that they should not have a doctoral degree at the date of the recruitment. They also have to be recruited following an open, merit-based, and transparent recruitment procedure. The advertisement for the job of the fellowship have to be at least on the Euraccess website, and they have to be published as widely as possible. So basically, the idea is that you do not fish in your own ponds of master's degree students. You have to open it up to the world. When these fellows are recruited, they all have to be enrolled in a PhD from minimum 1 EU member state and associated country. So that's important. Even in a standard doctoral network, all the fellows have to be enrolled in a PhD from at least 1 EU member state or associated countries. And for joint doctorates in at least 2. Now, these doctoral candidates, they can be from any nationality. Right? So it's not restricted to Europeans or associated countries. They can come from all over the world. But they have to fulfill the Marie Skłodowska-Curie action mobility condition. And that's true for all the MSCA actions. the doctoral candidates, they should not have resided or carried out their main activity in the country where they are recruited in the last 12 months, for more than 12 months in the last 3 years. So this is absolutely mandatory. So there is a mandatory mobility, international mobility for the fellows. So in summary, for the researcher, for all the modes, you can only recruit doctoral candidates, so they should not have a PhD at the time of their recruitment. They all have to abide with the MSCA mobility condition. They all have to be recruited following an open, fair, and transparent recruitment procedure, and they can be of any nationality. Now, for joint doctorates, they all need to be enrolled in a PhD from minimum 2 member states or associated country. But for the doctoral networks, the standard one and the industrial doctorate, they also all have to be enrolled in a PhD from a member state or an associated country, sorry. And for industrial doctorates, they should spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. Now, back to you, Audrey.
Thanks a lot, Julien. And I hope now all the eligibility conditions are clearer for you as an applicant. It's really important to pay attention to all of them when preparing your proposal. So let's test a bit your knowledge and see if you're focused on the presentation and what Julien told us before. And for this, I would like to invite you to Slido again. We have a short quiz where you can all participate. So please go to Slido, use the QR code which is appearing on the screen, or use the reference DN 2023. Please join for this quiz, as many as possible. And I will give the floor now to Eleni, who will guide you through the quiz. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Audrey. So, hello everyone again. For this next part, as Audrey explained, we have prepared a short quiz for you. It is actually, we hope you will enjoy it. It is actually a very short quiz with only 3 questions that will help us clarify and remember some important information about the DN 2023 call. Once again, we invite you all to join us now at Slido. And in order to do that, to take part in our quiz, in order to do that, please either scan the QR code you can see on your screen with your mobile device, or go to slido.com and enter the code #DN2023.
Maybe it would be good to see the Slido quiz that we can't see yet. So yes.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So now let's see how many participants have joined. Okay, we have already started. So this is our first question. Our first question is, what is mandatory under the DN 2023 call? Consortia must have at least 3 beneficiaries from EU member states. Each beneficiary should recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate. The maximum number of eligible person months is 540, and maximum 40% of the budget can be allocated to the same country or international organization. So please look carefully at the answers. Note that there may be several correct statements in this question, and select carefully what you think is correct. We still have time, so if anyone hasn't joined us yet, you can still join us and answer the first question. 10 seconds are left, 9. Choose carefully. And time is out. So let's see. 30% of you have answered that the consortium must have at least 3 beneficiaries from EU member states. Interesting. 91% answered that each beneficiary should recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate. And 73% have confirmed and are sure that the maximum number of eligible person months is 540. So let's move now to the next slide and see the correct answers. And yes, you were correct. Most of you were correct. Its beneficiaries should recruit only one, at least one doctoral candidate, minimum one. And the maximum number of eligible person months is in fact 540. But the first statement was incorrect. And why is that? It appears as if it was correct, but it isn't. The consortium must have at least 3 beneficiaries from EU member states or associated countries, meaning countries that are associated to the Horizon Europe program. And out of these 3, minimum one, must be an EU member state. At least one. So that is why this statement was incorrect. If everyone is ready, we can move on to our second question. So let's see. The second question is the following. What is applicable for the DN Joint Doctorate Implementation Mode under the DN 2023 call? So we are looking for the conditions applicable to the joint doctorates now. Let's see our statements. Let's see our answers. Once again, remember, there may be more than one correct statements. Please choose carefully. The proposed project duration could be up to 60 months. The maximum fellowship duration is 48 months. The secondments are limited to 50% of the fellowship duration. And letters of pre-agreement between PhD awarding institutions are no longer required at proposal stage. So once again, there may be more than one correct statements. So please select all the correct answers applicable for the joint doctorates. We have 5 seconds. And we are finished. Let's see. So, as it appears, most of you believe that the proposed project duration, the duration of the project, could be up to 60 months. And we agree with you. And that the maximum fellowship duration is 48 months. 85% of you believe that it is true. Finally, we cannot see the rest of the answers. We cannot see the percentage exactly, but less than you, less than 85, much less, believe that the secondments are limited to 50% of the fellowship duration. And let's move to the next slide to see what is correct. And yes, as you predicted, let's move back, please, to the correct answers. Thank you. So as you correctly guessed, the maximum project duration can be up to 60 months maximum. And the fellowship, its fellowship duration can be up to 48 months maximum limit. However, concerning the secondments, for the joint doctorates, as you remember, this question refers to joint doctorates. And for the joint doctorates, there is no limitation concerning the duration of secondments, as there is no limitation for the duration of secondments for industrial doctorates as well. Even in the standard doctoral networks, where there is a limitation, the limitation is not 50%. It is 1/3 of the total duration of the fellowship of the researchers. So now, let's move on to our third and final question. So, our final question is, what is an associated partner entitled to do? Host researchers during secondments and offer trainings. They are entitled to directly claim costs. They are entitled to participate in the supervisory board, to sign the grant agreement, and to recruit doctoral candidates. Once again, there may be more than one correct answers here, so please choose carefully what you think is correct and applicable for the associated partners. So what can they do? We still have a lot of time. We have 18 seconds and counting. Host researchers, trainings, directly claimed costs, supervisory board, grant agreement, recruitments. What is the correct answer or answers? And time is out. And let's see how we did. So most of you, 99%, almost all of you, believe that they can host researchers during secondments and offer trainings. We agree with you. And then only a very small percentage of 4% of you believe that an associated partner can directly claim costs. Again, 91%, most of you believe that they can participate in the supervisory board, and you are correct. And we cannot see the percentages on the screen to see how many believe that associated partners signed the grant agreement. But let's move on to the next slide then to see the correct answers, since we cannot see your participation. And as you correctly guessed, the associated partners can host researchers during secondments, and they can actually offer trainings. Also, they do participate in the supervisory board, and their role is crucial. But they cannot sign the grant agreement, which is signed only by the beneficiaries and the coordinator, including the coordinator and the European Research Executive Agency. Also, they do not recruit researchers, and as such, they cannot directly charge contributions to the action. We consider that the associated partner costs are already covered and they are already included in the institutional unit costs that are paid to the beneficiaries. So, hence, the European Research Executive Agency does not reimburse additional costs for the associated partners. And without any more delay, we have now reached our final slide, and we have reached the end of this quiz. Thank you very much for your active role, for your participation, your contributions. And we hope you enjoyed it, you liked it. We hope it was clear and helpful for you. And now, without further ado, we give the floor back to Audrey.
Thanks a lot, Eleni, for presenting this very insightful quiz. We are really sorry if we could not really see exactly the full package of answers and your full participation, but I noticed that many of you participated. We had reached almost more than 260 at some point participants in this quiz, so I think you could see everything through Slido at least, but this was also to test a bit your knowledge, and most of you followed very well Julien's presentation, so this is really nice to see, but do not forget that the presentation is not finished, that you need to know slightly more about some more technical and logistical details now about your proposal. And for this, Julien, you will guide us through the last part of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Back to me again, bear with me a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you a bit about the funding mechanisms, the evaluation criteria, and where you can find the resources to help you draft your proposal. So in terms of funding, we operate on a pretty straightforward basis, which is the unit cost. So basically, 1 unit is 1 month of 1 fellow. 1 person month is 1 unit. So that means that basically, if you're an entity that recruited 1 fellow for 36 months, you will have received at the end of your project 36 units of cost, right? So, and that's 100% reimbursement rate for this cost. So 1 unit is 1 month of eligible doctoral candidate. Now, in a bit more details, this unit cost, so this is a unit, and is divided in costs for the recruited researchers, so for the fellow, and cost for the institutions. So if we look at the left side, the category A, the contribution for the recruited researcher, you have the living allowance, which is basically the salary of the fellow. You should know that this is the gross amount, 3,400 euros. This is a gross amount, and this is subject to the country correction coefficient. So as I said before, the the living allowance of a fellow in a high purchasing power country is not the same than in a low purchasing power country. The mobility allowance, this allowance, all the fellows should receive it, because by definition, they had to undergo mobility in order to start their fellowship. If they did not undergo mobility, then they would not be eligible. So they all need to receive the mobility allowance. Family allowance, if applicable, is for those fellows who are entitled to it. Now in Horizon Europe, it's possible for a fellow to, even though they were not entitled to it at the beginning of the fellowship, if in the meantime they get married, for instance, then they can be entitled to it during their fellowship duration. Now, I will not dwell too much on the category A4 or A5, because this is really on an ad hoc basis during the implementation of the project in cases where the fellow needs to go for a long-term leave, or if there is a special need that the fellow has. So this is not really for the proposal stage, it's more for the project implementation stage. And then on the right side, you have the money that's for the institution, basically to run the project. So you have one part that's the research, training, and networking contribution, that's 1,600 euros. And there's a B2 management and indirect contribution, that's 1,200 euros. So that means that for 1 month that the fellow worked in your institution, you receive this unit. The left part has to go fully for the fellow, to the fellow. And the right part is basically 2,800 euros. That's for running the project. So for the management of the project, to pay for training, to pay for consumables, computing time, whatever. And when Eleni was saying that the associated partners cannot claim directly cost, actually the explanation here, to be more precise, is that this money, it doesn't mean that each fellow will have 2,800 euros to run their particular individual PhD, right? This is a network. So this money, this B part, can be redistributed within the network, within the consortium, as the consortium sees fit. Usually you define that in a consortium agreement. And you can decide that maybe one beneficiary provides more training than the others. So maybe you will give more money to this beneficiary for that reason. Maybe the coordinator has more management costs, so maybe it's up to you to decide. And from this money, you can also pay indirectly the associated partner. So if an associated partner provides a training or hosts a fellow during the secondment period, then you could use that money to pay the associated partner for the costs of organizing the training or hosting the fellow. Now, as I said, funding mechanism pretty straightforward, 2 slides. Now, what about the evaluation? How will your proposals be evaluated? So one thing you need to know is that this is a peer review process, right? So who's evaluating your proposal? Basically, your peers. So we basically recruit experts, researchers from outside, so those are not REA staff. And there are 2 stages in the proposal evaluation. First, your proposal will be assessed by 3 independent experts. Now, these 3 experts, they don't know each other, and they don't know who the other expert has the same proposal. So they don't know each other, they don't talk to each other, they know nothing. They will assess your proposal and write an individual evaluation report individually. Then, when they're done that, then they're going to regroup in the consensus group, and they will have to agree. They will have to discuss and come up with consensus set of comments, assessments, statements about your proposal, and the consensus score. And that is basically the consensus report. And this is the outcome you receive at the end of the evaluation on your proposal. You have the consensus report, which is the consensus view of 3 different experts. Now, which are these criteria? So obviously, experts cannot decide to assess the proposal on whatever they decide is important. There is a grid for that in order to level the playing field between the different applicants and to be sure that there's consistency and fairness. So we have 3 main criteria. excellence, impact, and implementation. And within these criteria, there are sub-criteria, right? So I will not read all of them. You will see that on the slide. You also will see that in the funding and tender portal, I will tell you that later, you also see the evaluation criteria. So you will see in the proposal template that basically the template follows the order of these criteria and sub-criteria. If we could go back to the award criteria, thank you. You will need in your proposal template to draft your proposal, to write down your proposal, and you will be assessed on each sub-criteria. And you will get the score per criterion, right? Now, it's important to know also that there is a weighting in these different criteria. So excellence counts for 50%, impact for 30%, and implementation for 20%. So excellence counts more than implementation, but all the parts are important. And the priority means that if there are two proposals with the exact same score, how do we differentiate them, these ex aequo proposals? Well, if they have the same score, but one has a higher score in excellence, this one goes first. Then if they have the same score in excellence, but one has a higher score in impact, this one goes first, and then implementation. So this is what the priority means. Now, I told you about proposal template, funding and tender portal, and that's here basically how to apply. So if you go to the funding and tender portal, you will have the link in the next slide. Basically, if you go to a search engine on the internet and you look funding and tender portal, you will find it. And in the funding and tender portal, there is also a search engine. If you type DN, you will immediately find all the doctoral networks call. You just click on 2023 and you have the call page. And on this call page, you have all the useful documents that you need in order to prepare your proposal. So you have the work program, you have the Horizon Europe program guide, and it's important to check that for the countries that are eligible to get funding or not. You have the guide for applicant that I strongly advise you to read. You have the proposal template. So very important. In the proposal template, it's the template, but there is also explanations on what is expected from you to draft in these different paragraphs. So it's very important for you to use it and to use the latest one. This year's template is slightly modified compared to the previous template, nothing revolutionary, but it's still a different template, so you should use the last template. There is also an online manual and the frequently asked questions. Basically, your proposal is divided in two parts. Part A, that is structured data that you fill in directly on the website. And this is administrative data on the participants, on the budget, ethics question, things like that. And then you have the part B, that's the narrative part. So that's where you have the template that you need to fill in. And this part B is divided in two parts as well. You have the part B1, which has a page limit of 30 pages. Please respect the page limit, because any page in excess of the page limit will just be automatically blanked out. So the experts will not have access to it. And there's a part B2 that basically has no page limit. And you will see in the proposal template, it's information about the different participants, the pre-agreement letter for the joint doctorate, things like that. One thing I forgot to tell you before is that for the 2023 call, a new feature is that there is no letter of commitment for the associated partners anymore. So you should not submit a letter of commitment for the associated partners. Now, of course, you have to explain in the proposal what these associated partners will do within the network, but you don't need to provide a letter of commitment. So basically, to prepare your proposal, read the work program and all the guidance documents that are available. Use the proposal template, and I really insist on that. Read carefully the evaluation form, so you will know what you will be assessed on, and you will be solely assessed on these criteria and sub-criteria. Don't underestimate any part of the proposal. This is still a very competitive call. We had around 15% success rate last year, So it means that you have to be really good in all the subsections. So even though I told you before, implementation weight less than excellence, yes, that is true, but you really need to be excellent in all the three criteria in order to make the cut. And write each section clearly and in coherence with all sections in the proposal. That's important. Also, a word of advice, it's always good to perform an internal peer review with your consortium partners. Have someone else read it. Consult your national contact points. They are very experienced. They give a wealth of information. Duly complete Part A. There is a common mistake in the budget. So there is a warning in the guide for applicant. I advise you to have a look at it, to not make that mistake. Start preparing early and don't leave it for the last minute. If we could summarize, basically think like an evaluator, write for an evaluator. Look at the sub-criteria, look at the evaluation criteria, and look at your proposal and think, how would I assess my own proposal if I was an evaluator? This is the best advice we can give you. Now, resources, where can you find all this information? If I had one place I would point you to is the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. It's really the one-stop shop where you have links to all the other documents. So here you will see the work program, the manual for application, the different documents. There is also a functionality for partner search. You can also have a look at the MSCA website. So those are hyperlinks. You will be able to click on it when you get the slide. You can look at our website as well. A very important set of documents is the MSCA guidelines on supervision. You will see that the quality of supervision is what sub-criterion in excellence. So I advise you to have a look at the guide to give you ideas on how to draft this part of your proposal. And the code of conduct for the recruitment of researchers, I strongly advise you to have a look at it as well, because you will need to explain in the proposal how you strive to abide to the code of conduct for your recruitment procedure. If you have any question, you can always go to your national contact points. If you go to the Funding and Tender portal and you look for MSCA national contact point, you can find them, but there will be a hyperlink on this slide as well. You can also ask questions to the Research Inquiry Service, and if they don't know the answer, they will just forward it to us. And should I do or should you do the inspirational quote from Marie Skłodowska-Curie?
Can do.
I do it? All right. So, and the motto, I told you, MSCA is all about the individual, the career development, the skills development of the people. And we'd like to finish with this quote from Marie Skłodowska-Curie: "You cannot hope to build a better world without improving the individuals." So that's the word of my end word for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Julien, for a very nice and interesting presentation, and also very important for you as a potential applicant to prepare your proposal. So just to recap a bit on the few novelties, incentives and simplification that we have now for the DN23 call. So don't forget about the industrial doctorates and joint doctorates with their own incentives. So for industrial doctorates, the non-academic sector doesn't need to be a beneficiary. They can participate either as beneficiary or associated partner. For joint doctorates, we have now the extension of the duration up to 5 years, with a possibility to recruit up to 4 years the fellows within the envelope of 540 person months. There's no limit on the secondment duration for these two implementation modes. For the standard doctoral networks, don't forget that we are now back with the initial size of 540 person months. And finally, as Julien mentioned also at the end of his presentation, at the proposal stage, we don't require the letters of commitment for associated partners anymore. And I see we will maybe have some questions about it later on in Slido. So these are also a nice simplification for you, and I hope you will acknowledge it. Just to reassure also all of you that those slides will be available shortly after the event on the platform. So we will upload them immediately after the end of this event. So we have few more frequently asked questions before moving on. The first one is about the industrial and joint doctorates, if they are evaluated differently from the standard doctoral networks. So for this one, I will give you the answer, and the answer is quite straightforward. They are evaluated as the standard doctoral network, so using the same award criteria that Julien presented you, and they are all competing together within the scientific panels. So meaning that we have expert evaluators that will receive a mix of the three implementation modes, so either industrial, joint, or standard doctoral networks, and they will have to assess all of them against the evaluation criteria and sub-criteria. So the next question is on how to select the descriptors in a DN proposal, and this is a very important question as an applicant, and Julien, you will tell us more about it?
Sure. So basically the descriptors, we touched about it a bit earlier. There's a list of descriptors, MSCA descriptors that you can find again through the funding and tender portal. You have a list of descriptors. So those are a list of keywords basically for each panel, for each scientific panel. So when you submit your proposal, you will have to select a scientific panel to which you submit. I said before, you cannot submit the same proposal in different scientific panels, so you have to choose one. And the first descriptor, and you would have to select 5 descriptors, up to 5 descriptors, minimum 3, maximum 5, for your proposal. And the first descriptor has to be in the list of descriptors for the main panel, for the scientific panel to which you submit your proposal. But then, starting from descriptor number 2, you can select any descriptor from any scientific panel. And this is to account also for the interdisciplinary or multidisciplinarity of your proposal. So yes, basically have a look at the list of descriptors so that you can see what is the main panel to which you want to submit, and then select the other ones according to your proposal.
Thanks a lot, Julien. We have 2 more questions. We are running a bit out of time, so let's go quickly through the next one, which is about resubmission of previous DN proposals. So are the resubmission allowed? And I think Michaela will give you the answer.
Indeed. So as Julien stated before in his presentations, resubmissions there are resubmission restrictions in this call. So it means that if your proposal received a score of less than 80%, it cannot be resubmitted this year. And you will see that in the evaluation summary report of your previous evaluation, there is a statement which actually states exactly that it cannot be resubmitted. Nevertheless, if the proposal is resubmitted, we have actually tools to verify whether similar proposals have been submitted. And in case we detect one proposal, which is, we believe, a resubmission, and which is similar to a previously submitted proposal, we will actually ask you as applicants to explain to us how the proposal is different from one previously resubmitted. And once we receive your reply, we will assess it. For critical cases, we might also use experts. And at the end of our analysis, we will submit the case to the Admissibility and Eligibility Committee, who will take the final decision as to whether your proposal is eligible or not.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. And the last frequently asked question that we have to end this session is about, is there any recommended number of associated partners in a DN proposal? Eleni, do you have any ideas?
Thank you. The answer is no. There is no recommended number of associated partners for a DN proposal. The actual number, the number of partners depends highly on its individual research training program and on its associated partners' added value to the program. So therefore, each associated partner should should have an active real role in the project, and they should describe that clearly in their proposal. Remember, associated partners, whether they are linked to a beneficiary or not, they no longer have to provide a signed letter of commitment. However, their role should be clearly described in Part B1 and Part B2 of the proposal. And remember, you have to add all the associated partners in the Part A of the proposal as well. So no letter of commitment, but only letters of pre-agreement for this call, nothing else for the joint doctorates.
Thank you, Eleni. Yes, indeed, it's very important for the associated partner to also be added in the Part A. And this is part also of the commitment that they give when they appear in the Part A. Okay, so we are now at the end of this session on the novelties, incentives, and all the information that you need to prepare your proposal for the Doctoral Networks 2023 call. I would like to remind you that you can still submit any questions that you may have. Even you received a lot of information already, but if you have any remaining questions, you can go through Slido and submit them. You have the QR code appearing on the screen, or you can use hashtag DN2023. So we will start the question and answer session after a short break of 15 minutes. And then we will see you all back for this last part of this information event. So you have a short break now. Let's convene again in 15 minutes. Thank you and stay tuned.